HarperCollins presents The Shetland Way, Community and Climate Crisis on My Father's Islands, written and read by Marianne Brown. To Esme, who is basically the boss around here. Prologue. I was standing at the foot of the open grave when a shadow nudged into my peripheral vision. First, I thought it was a raptor, and I squinted at it eagerly, hoping for a visitation from something rare or meaningful, a sympathetic act from the residents of these peat-layered hills of whom I knew so little. A longer look revealed the commonplace yellow beak, grey wings and reptilian glare of a herring gull. It was too busy gripping the wind to meet my gaze. Beside me, figures zipped up against the February weather kept their eyes on the ground, their faces washed in horizontal rain. One mourner recited a well-known poem about a kale yard and the eternal cycle of life and death. The lines, "Aye, some een dead, aye, some een born," crumbling into the wind. The same scene had been enacted by generations before us. A long line of wet faces, muddy feet and tight throats, stretching far back into the history of these islands, to a time before the value of the sea and land was measured on a ledger. Along the shore, the tide ground the detritus of thousands of iterations of human life into the silt. Ceramic cup handles, rusted nails, scraps of nylon fishing net. Beneath the undulations of grass and peat bog, ancient tree roots lay as a reminder of what this earth once was. As we shivered between the gravestones, accompanied by the ghosts of our dead relatives, I considered the contrast of my own life with theirs, a childhood safe within the predictable perimeters of a large and pleasant city, never knowing the terror of a suddenly swelling sea, never experiencing belly-scraping hunger. I wondered what my ancestors would have thought of such an existence, and whether our shared bloodline was enough for me to claim a place by their side. On the surrounding hills, more spectres lurked. Some were little more than tussocky lumps in the nettles, while others retained the ragged remnants of a tarred roof clinging to the rafters. These were the skeletons of crofts, small, rented farms of a few acres, typical of the north and west of Scotland and the Isles. The way of life for the residents of these stone shells was tough, with crofters living hand to mouth, growing crops like oats or kale and keeping a cow to survive. In solid contrast to these disintegrating structural remains, a grand building stood at the end of the bay, its many windows glinting blankly against the dull light. Vaux House, with its 7 bedrooms and large walled garden, was part of the visual language of historic inequality. As well as relying on the varying moods of the weather and the productivity of the soil, the crofting residents were also dependent on the whims of the landlords who owned mansions like these. The landowning class could, and often did, evict tenants at short notice to make way for more profitable sheep farms, or demand a cow for the loss of a fishing boat, even if the men on board had drowned. These were days of starvation and emigration. Eventually, legislation would introduce security of tenure, fair rents and heritable rights. Decades later, my great-grandparents used this right to buy the croft they were renting, a 2-room, 1-storey building near the foot of a hill called Snoogie. They laid the foundations for a new chapter in the fortune of the Browns, for my grandfather and eventually my father, to build homes on the land, both just about visible from the patch of grass I now stood upon, next to their graves. Other lives had passed too. The clouds of birds that once followed the fishing boats to the herring station, or the whaling vessels that would empty their cargo near the mouth of the bay. Now the empty seas mirror the empty skies, and the empty crofts return their heavy stones to the hills.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?